Welcome to EJH British Cars. So today we're going to move on to the rear of the car, TR2, and I'm going to replace part of what they call the saddle panel, which is the piece of metal that goes between the back window and the front of the boot lid. And I'm going to replace it from the trunk boot lid hinge to the boot lid hinge. So the first part is to cut up a piece to make it fit into that, because it's a little complex. It's got a compound curve, but I found a neat thing making a sample piece the other day, and I'll show you when we get there. So let's go take a look. So the first thing I've done is to cut out a piece of metal, and it's bigger in both dimensions, because I'm going to figure this is about where the hinge line goes. So I'm going to trim it back, and I also made it too long because I want to be able to trim this down and see where I want to cut this panel out, because I don't want to try to replace this portion, because it comes down and it comes back over. It's just, plus it's got this 90 on it. I don't have anything that will bend stuff like that. So we cut a piece off. It's a couple inches too long. It's probably about an inch too deep. And the first thing I'm trying to do is to scribe a line here that matches this line here. And it doesn't really show, but when you put a straight edge up here, when it touches in the center, there's about a 1/4 inch gap at either end. So it's got just a slight arch to it. So that's about the 5th line that I've drawn. I'm still not that happy with it, but I got it clamped down and I got it square. And then I'm just using this piece of scrap metal, putting it in against the back, holding the pen in it and scribing it along. And I may go do that again, because it's still kind of wobbly back there. Of course, this edge is not exactly the straightest thing in the world either. But to move it along, and it's really easy when I do it like that, but when you're trying to do it with a pen in hand, not so easy. So I think I'm going to give that another scribe, and then we'll get back to you. Alright, so I cut it on the bandsaw. It seemed to be the easiest thing. And it's a pretty good fit. You also notice, by not going so far out, right here, these 2 holes are where the strap goes for the roof. This is about where I'm going to cut this off, that this starts to arch off significantly more acutely from that point. So the next point is to take, I'm not sure, I think of this as a machinist square, but it's probably some sort of a carpenter square, but you see them at Home Depot and all the rest. So this piece of sheet metal right here is about 7/8, which is where this is set. Now I'm going to have to adjust this back a little bit more to make up for the tip of the felt pen. But then I'll just take it apart and I'll scribe a line, so I'll have another line, because I need to make that 40-degree bend. Maybe something more or less, but something around there. So I need to make that parallel to this cut edge, and this cut edge will eventually become this top edge here. So I get set up for that and do that. So this is a Harbor Freight 15-pound anvil that I strapped onto the swing arm here just for a convenient height. And we're going to hold the sheet metal up. This actually has a very gentle radius on it. So if I hold it with the long edge down and the line touching here, I can use this flat body hammer to start folding that over. So you don't want to fold all this at once. You just want to go along really slowly. It'll take several passes to make that approximately 40 degrees up. I did buy an angle set. So that's set to the angle that piece is at. So I'll have something to gauge if I've bent this enough. So this is going to be kind of fussy. So I'm going to, well, I'll set the camera on the tripod and we'll see if we can't do a little bit for you. I don't know how well you can see this, but what I'm going to do is hold this on here. And I've got a line scribed there, and I'll just hammer here and work my way down for the first pass. So I got this first edge lined up. Get the first edge lined up and just get my edge started. I got to keep an eye on that line, because there's nothing holding it there but my fingers. Bent it off maybe 5 degrees. Hammer is actually a little light for this. I may go grab a ball peen. The trouble with a light hammer, this is a good face for it, but it's so light, I'd have to swing hard to do that, and I don't want to do that. I want to push the metal. I don't want to strike the metal. So I go to the ball peen hammer, which I think this is a 16 ounce, and this is probably about 12. It is significantly heavier. It's actually what I used yesterday on my test piece. It definitely feels better. Well, there's the first test fit. So that looks pretty good. This back edge of the original car is kind of doing a bit of this, so, and we've got it too long. You can see here where this starts to curve off. But if we go back to here, this is about where I want to cut it to. That looks like it's going to be pretty good. So one of the nice things that happens, because this edge is curved, when you bend this, it puts a lot of that curve this way in it that you need. So it just clamped in. I mean, it'll spring up a little bit if I let go of it, but it's probably, well, I may just stretch it a tiny bit along that ridge with the stretcher, since I own one. But that's looking pretty good. And as I say, we're way long on this side. I want to probably cut this back. What I'm starting to think about is I might joggle, cut it back to about here, and then joggle it with the air joggler. I cut this back a little bit, then I can put one piece under the other and weld them together. I think that'll be pretty good. But not bad. There's just a little bit of hammer marks in this, so I may go through here after I get off camera, and I'll just take and use the light mallet against that just to try to flatten that out a little better. I went ahead and cleaned up this edge and drilled out all the spot welds. And notice that they're right on the very top, which I'm assuming is so that the marks from the spot weld are covered by that capping, because the capping only comes maybe halfway down. And also this little plate right here seems to have been welded across the top, and so it of course bonded to the top of that as well. So I just ground that edge like you would a door skin. So the next thing to do, I want to make my lines here and here, and I'm basically, my thought is I'm just going to center on this line, because I want the hinges to cover up as much of that seam as possible. Not that I anticipate the seam will look bad, but even better if you can't see it. And then I'm vacillating whether I want to cut this back here, half an inch or so, and then put the new piece, I'll put a step in it and put it underneath, or if I want to try and bend the piece down and spot weld it through here. But I don't think the tongs are going to get in there. I'll have to take a look at that. But the advantage is that I'd get rid of all this crap, and we'd just have this edge to finish off, which wouldn't be that difficult once it was in there. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this up. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a line here, and then we can cut this out. And before I do all that, I want to take some measurements. I want to get this measurement. I'll get it here and there. Also where this hole is at. If I'm going to cut this on the half here, I shouldn't have to worry about where the holes are for that at that point. But I'll take those now. The thing I want to make sure of is that this back brace is a little bit, well, it's not that easy to move, but it does. I just want to make sure that when I put the new piece in here, that I don't push it that way or that way. I want to wind it back where it is within a reasonable margin. So let me get my pen out and we'll start marking it up. I'm using my cutoff tool to cut this line. See, I've already cut this one. Went pretty quick. One thing I did do, I took that flat chisel I've been using to cut spot welds, and underneath this panel I drove it under this panel and on top of that brace to open up this gap just a little bit, so that the wheel doesn't hit anything. And that seems to work pretty well. As you can see, that's separated nicely, both sides. All I do is cut along that line. And I don't think there's anything underneath there. It is here right at the end, so I may take my wheel and cut the first few inches, and then I think I'll see how it goes. I may go back to my power shears. I may just stay with the wheel. We'll see. As you can see, there's the old piece out. Here are the under braces. And you can hear this one seemed to have had a small amount of paint on it, I guess. Or is that just steel that's not rusty? That may just be steel that's not rusty. So I'm going to clean all this up. I need to grind down the nubs off the spot welds here as well. And we'll get some sealant on there. Clean this up. A little weld through primer in here. I didn't want to put anything on this surface because I'm going to be spot welding it. Decided to leave this piece because one thing I kind of wasn't thinking about, this piece has an arch up, and if I try to pull a 90 on this piece of steel, it's going to flatten that out again, and I'll wind up fighting that. So I decided not to aggravate myself. So as you can see, I've trimmed this down, and very carefully. So I cut it just a tiny bit oversized, and I've been grinding a little bit to get it to fit. I put notches here because this brace is right against that metal, so it's not going to get underneath this piece. I'm going to joggle it here in a minute, but so that goes in like that. It goes down like that, and if I tap it so everything's snug, this joint lines up. This all looks good down here, and much the same over here. I got just a little bit of gap on my joints for the make a better weld. It's not perfectly centered, that's why this one's sitting on top right now. But I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to use my joggling tool, which is this. This is Harbor Freight. I reviewed it quite a while ago. So this part of the die will punch a hole for if you're doing plug welds. And this, if you look, there's a sort of a zigzag in it. That'll joggle the edge. And then when you pull the handle, see it moves back and forth. So, and it does about a 1/2 inch, and this is just under a 1/2 inch, so that's good because I want a little bit of a gap here so that it's not a perfectly straight edge and all the rest of that stuff. So that's what's next. I think I got it. So I still have to, when we'll go to weld this, I'm going to have to get the edges to line up, but just going to do that as we go. But there's the joggle in there to let that piece slide underneath. And the ends look good. Don't forget the hinges are going to go over that much, so that's good. It's just a little high in the back, so after it's all welded together, I'll probably just take the grinder to it, get it a little flusher. I knew it was going to be a little long. And like I say, I'll have to get the bits that are sitting flush right now. We'll tack those. And then we can take some of the clamps off, and that'll help us move this around. So like this piece is sitting a little low right here. We'll be able to pick that up, but right now I need that clamp to hold that in because there's nothing holding this. But like right here, it's at the right elevation. I'm going to spot weld this edge. I'm going to spot weld this edge, and this we're going to put a bead on. So between them, that'll work. Well, what's left to do now is to weld that in place, and we've done plenty of welding videos, so I wasn't going to bother with that, and I'm tired for today, so I won't do that till tomorrow. It's been a challenge to make that piece. I've never made a back saddle, and I haven't done a whole lot of large panel beading. I've done a couple of little repair patches and stuff like that. Except for the trunk floor, that's probably the biggest panel I've made, and it's certainly the only one that's had a curve this way and a curve that way kind of thing. Compound curves. But it was kind of fun. I don't think I'd want to do it every day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share, and I will enjoy reading anything you have to say about what I've done right or wrong. That this is all kind of new territory for me, so we're learning together. See you next time.